My name is Garrett Hill. I am the head judge for Wsk Street skateboarding discipline. In the test sets that you're about to view, we use the exact same judging process and criteria that we applied at any World Skate qualification event, and as well as the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. All right, getting into the overall design and overall feel of the field of play at this skate park. Straight out of the gates, you'll probably notice that this is a rather large skate park. There are a lot of different options here. It caters to all different kinds of skateboarding. So technically we should be able to see all different kinds of styles be able to excel in this kind of environment. This is what I like to see in a course that caters to different kinds of skateboarding because it's exciting to watch. What you'll notice is we have a classic big section handrail. We'll refer to that as the main handrail or big handrail. It's around 10 stairs big. It's round. It's a very versatile sized rail. This is not only big enough for the men to be able to get technical on, but this is small enough for the women to be able to get pretty tech on this as well. So I like this size handrail. We also have probably one of the biggest obstacles I've ever seen at a skate park, and that is in this bump to massive monster hubba. This thing is about chest high. So if you see people doing tricks on this, rather in their run or in the single trick section, it is going to get rewarded because even launching up to a 50-50 on this thing felt absolutely bonkers. In addition to these obstacles, we have a lot of supplemental variations of obstacles. We have bump to flat bars, we have bumps to ledges, we have a small hubba ledge on the outer wall of the course, and we also have smaller handrails. So there are lots of different options. There's stairs, there's handrails, there's quarter pipes as well. In order to utilize this course in the best way, you're gonna need to be able to use those quarter pipes. You're gonna see in this test set, the runs that stand apart from the others are the ones that are able to utilize those quarter pipes in order to just travel the length of the skate park and get as many tricks in as humanly possible. So it's going to be interesting, lots of variation here. For men's test set 1, we are starting with the anchor run from Wsk Skateboard. Starting off with a crooked grind, board grab pop over on the bump to flat bar, an alley-oop to 50-50 grind on the bump to small hubba. Missing an opportunity to hit the quarter pipe on that edge of the skate park. There's a good backsmith to back tail, he's got good speed. Again, missed opportunity to do a bank trick or a quarter pipe trick. Coming into the first bail of the run, in the middle of the run, which really throws the flow off. Was going for a good trick, but trying to pick back up with a 360 flip on the pyramid and a kick flip up the step up. Backside nose blunt stall on the quarter bank. And ending with a 270 backside lip slide on the big handrail. Not all bails are created equal. Bailing on a flat ground trick in your run and bailing on the big section trick are going to make a substantial difference when we score your run. So considering that the bail in this run was on a trick that was the most difficult trick in the run, it's going to have a more substantial score impact when we have to deliver that score. So at the end of the day, this run feels like a middle of the road kind of score. So we're giving that a 50.55, and that is the anchor score. The anchor single trick score with Wsk Skateboard is a bigger flip frontside board slide on the big handrail. There is no repetition rule that's applied to this trick because he did not do it in the run that counted towards his overall score. And so he's going to get the full point total. He landed it clean, the execution was clean, so we're giving him an 88.11. Starting with Daisuke Ikeda. We've got a backside 360 on the pyramid gap, followed by a backside kickflip on the pyramid gap. Both of these were done okay. Faking nose blunt stall on the quarter pipe is cool. It's better than just doing an axle stall. It's considered an actual trick. And then we've got 3 bails in a row. So once you bail 3 times in a run, that run is pretty much over. He ends with a kickflip on flat ground, which we don't really count towards the overall score when you do a flat ground flip trick. Once you bail 3 times, your run is pretty much done. You cannot expect to get any kind of a competitive score. The whole point of a run is to be able to string tricks together. It's a part of the judging criteria. You can still put up a good score if you bail once. I've seen okay scores even with 2 bails sometimes, depending on the technical difficulty and what we're seeing on the field of play, but with 3 bails in a run, that's pretty much it. So it's going to get an 8.03. Our next skater in is Jake Alardi. Dropping it with a lot of speed, with just an ollie on the pyramid top with a frontside tail slide on the bump to really big hubba. I like that he went out to straight. 360 flip on the pyramid top. Still pretty clean. Backside Smith run, then a bump to flat bar. Front blunt on the quarter pipe, which is good. Followed up with a kickflip frontside board slide on the 5-stair rail. That's a good 2-piece. I like when people do quarter pipe tricks into flip trick rail. Backside tail slide on the quarter pipe was a good choice. He keeps his flow going. Into the gap to front blunt. So these are all pretty good moves. Ending with a big spin frontside board slide to fakie on the big rail. So what I'm looking at here is a moderately difficult run. It's not incredible. This doesn't feel like an 80s run because there wasn't a single trick in that run that would score in the 80s in the single trick section, which is something for you to consider when you're judging a run. Is, would any trick in this run be scored in the 80s? Would any trick in this run be scored in the 90s? Are all the supplemental tricks around this score like-minded? Does this make sense? This feels like a 70s run to me, and that's exactly where he landed. For that first run, he's going to get a 75.73. Good speed, good trick selection, no repetition rule deductions. It's a good run score. Next rider up, we have Mickey Papa. Dropping in, starting with a fast kickflip frontside board slide, which is done really clean. Unfortunately followed up with a bail. It's on the small obstacle, that's not a hard trick, so that shouldn't affect the run score too much. It's got a rock fakie. Picking it back up with a really good switch flip on the pyramid gap. Not much has happened here, but these are still the tricks that he has landed. He's done well. Cool nollie frontside nose slide. Again, kind of medium difficulty with just a frontside air out of the quarter pipe into the bank. Frontside feeble on the bump to flat bar. And ending with a blunt fakie on the quarter pipe. Again, this feels like middle of the road with 1 bail. It's not better than the anchor score, but it can be cheated pretty close to that. So a 48.43 feels pretty fair. Just can't go above the anchor score. Next up, we have Yuto. Dropping in, starting with a really difficult nollie nose blunt on the big handrail, which is a great way to start. Helps with the overall impression. Followed up with a backside blunt stall. He's gotten a lot better at implementing quarter pipe tricks into his runs. Unfortunately, he's got the bail there. He probably would have done another quarter pipe trick there if he hadn't have bailed. Cool 360 flip down the stairs. We always like to reward flip tricks done downstairs, especially in runs. The risk is there. So that's 2 bails now that he has in this run. He's Just got enough time for another big section trick here. Wow. Yeah, the Nollie 270 lip slide. Even though he's got two cool big section tricks here, the two bails in his runs really affected the overall flow and consistency, which is a major judging criteria point. So when we see runs that have multiple bails in them, I like to look back at my notes and see, do I have any other runs that have two bails in them that I can compare this to? And since we do, we have Daisuke's run. He had two bails. He got a 34.83. Even with the two bails being similar, this run is still definitely technically way more difficult than Daisuke's run and should be in another point bracket up from him, which is where we landed at 41.34. This run score can jump substantially if Yuto is able to remove those bails. Next rider in is Sora Shirai. Starting off with a really tough trick with that 180 switch crooks on the big hubba. 360 flip on the pyramid gap, it's a great start. Backside Smith grind on the pyramid rail. Missed opportunity there for a quarter bank trick. Followed up with a back tail to fakie on the big bump to big hubba. Frontside blonde on the bump to flat bar. Big spin backside board slide. Ending with kind of a sketchy Vero heel flip shove it. So here's where you need to be careful about your run scores, is that there are things that are missing in this run. This isn't an incredibly dynamic run. There is technical difficulty here to justifying getting a substantial score, but this is not the hardest run that we've seen. Compared to Yuto's 83, there's not enough here for me to justify putting that incredibly close to Yuto's. I like that there's technical difficulty here. I like that there's no bails, but there's only one flip trick on the pyramid bank and a sketchy one kind of thrown in at the end. And it just felt like he was just using the bump to big hubba. I don't think that he used the course as well as Yuto did. I don't think that the trick selection was as good as Yuto's. But visually, this run shouldn't be leaps and bounds away from Yuto's. And I also want to consider the message that we're sending out when you send a score out. So a 79.99 to me visually is the right score, because it's letting Sora know that there are things that are still missing from this run in order to be the best run of the day. Next up is Giovanni. Starting with a fast backside blindside fakie. That's a really cool half cab alley-oop to frontside nose grind. Nice little frontside ollie disaster on the quarter pipe. It's got good speed, good flow here. Backside nose bump's cool. Backside disaster on the quarter pipe. The heel flip frontside board slide is great. Nice backside nose run on the baby hubba. It's got good flow here. This makes me think of Jake Alardi's line. And there we have our first bail of the run, which kind of makes that fall apart. But if I were you right now, I'd be referencing back to what we scored Jake Alardi to see where this is going to land. And that's the end of the run right there. So if we look back to Jake Alardi's score, he got a 75.73. He had similar tricks that were of the same caliber. Technical difficulty wise, I would say that these tricks were probably harder than Jake's. So a fully realized Giovanni line, I would probably score above Jake Alardi's first line, but considering he has the bail here, it wouldn't be fair to put that above Jake's score. So we shouldn't be thinking in the 70s, we should be thinking in the 60s. The caliber and the trick selection and the difficulty of the tricks is definitely a higher bracket than our anchor score from Garbatio. They both have one bail in them, but the trick selection here is a lot better. The judging criteria is way more fulfilled in this run, so we're gonna put him in the middle of the 60s at 64.32. Up next, we have Shane O'Neill. Starting off with a nollie crooked grind on the bump to ledge, which nobody's done yet. Big spin frontside board slide to fakie, normally a staple in all of his runs. Yeah, the big spin frontside board slide to fakie has definitely lost its potency over the years as well. The judges don't really care to see that anymore. Bailing on the switch flip backside tail slide, which seems like it was probably going to be the hardest filler that he would have put into his run, and that's a really risky trick to try. Switch big spin on the pyramid gap, no one's done that yet. Wow, that was really good. Crook nollie flip and 360 flip on the pyramid. And that's the end of the run. So that run, even though it's got a bail in it and that substantially affected the overall score, that technical difficulty, I love it. I love it when people do switch tricks. I love it when they do flip tricks out. To me, this is more difficult, technically speaking, than Garbacio's run, because the hardest thing in Garbacio's one was a backside 270 lip slide on the big rail. Big spin front board from Shane is comparable to that. And with the crook nollie flip, it's just more technically difficult. So we always like to reward that and make sure that we're sending the right message. You can still get scored higher with a run that has less tricks in it if they're more technically difficult than a run that has a lot of tricks in it. So say Shane does a run that has 4 tricks in it, but they're bonkers technically difficult. They can still get scored higher than a run from, say, Jake Alardi, who will do 11 tricks, but it'll be backside tail slides and frontside board slides. So it's something important to keep in mind. You absolutely have to reward technical difficulty and uniqueness and style. The execution, the way that he did all these tricks was definitely on point and definitely justifiable to score that above our anchor score. Not by too much, but just visually to send the right message. So we're not going to go bananas high over the anchor score, but it is fair to put this at a 56.34. Next up, we've got Wsk Midler. 270 back lip on the big handrail, followed up with an alley-oop to 50-50 on the bump to small hubba. It's a cool little two-piece there. Frontside nose grind on the bump to flat bar. The difficulty there is pretty low. It's a nice recovery. Backside 180 nose grind. Not too many people were hitting that spot. See, I like that frontside air. That's better than Mickey Papa's just frontside ollie. I like that alley-oop. Backside Smith grind, pretty stock filler. Yeah, the cab back lip. That was a cool way to end that. He normally does a really good job with starting a run strong and ending a run strong. And it's important to do that. You want to have both of those things because it just adds to the overall impression. So that run had a really good use of course. The trick difficulty was pretty good. It wasn't outstanding. It wasn't phenomenal, but he did fulfill a lot of the judging criteria in that run. Although there was not any flip tricks, but when I see this kind of a run, it has more landed tricks than Sora's run. And that was the one that I was thinking of that we put at that high 70s. For me, this run has more in it. I don't think it's fair to be too far away from Sora's run, but I think just considering that he has more landed tricks and the trick difficulty was similar to Sora's and he fulfilled more of the judging criteria, I can justify putting this run just above Sora's run. And that's where it's going to land at an 80.74. Next in, we have Kelvin Hofler. Starting with the frontside blunt slide pop over, the bump to flat bar, big frontside tail slide on the gap to hubba. cannot stress enough how tall that thing was. Really nice nollie frontside nose grind, pop out. I like that frontside blunt stall on the quarter pipe. Fortunately, we got a bail there in the middle of the run. Again though, I want you to understand that you can still get a good run score, at least a comparable run score on the board without having a run that's perfect. There are still runs that have bails in them that you could still, based on what you've seen, hook it up pretty well. And with the cat backside lip slide, it seems like this is kind of one of those runs. It has a little bit of everything. I like the flow. I like the trick selection. It was really good. It's definitely not anywhere near the 80s, but it's definitely justified to be in the low 70s. And our last rider in this test set is Ryan DeCenzo. Starting with a really cool switch backside blunt slide. It's an unfortunate step off there. It's still considered a bail. Backside disaster on the quarter pipe. Remember that not all bails are created equal, and that's probably one of the smallest tricks you'll see him bail on in this run. Really big backside blunt slide on the bump to hubba. No one else did that. See, even though he didn't blast above that quarter bank, he still utilized that quarter bank to do an actual trick. So he's got a frontside flip on there, and it just adds to the total overall impression, which is smart. Followed up by a frontside 360 on the pyramid gap with a really sick frontside flip over the big section, over the rail, which nobody hit. So even with the bail, this is what I'm talking about. This is a really good example of still being able to put up a good score, even with the bail. So it makes me think about Midler's run, and we gave that a 72.4. Now there are multiple flip tricks in this run, and the technical difficulty I think is still there. And when I think about how far I need to space it, I'm pretty similar to Midler's run. I wouldn't go too far away from it. So I'm gonna give that a 74.15. And I cannot stress this enough, how important it is to reference runs that you have already seen when you were coming up with a run score. You cannot, with confidence, give a run score out unless you have some data to back it up. So as a judge, it's important for you to find out what your strengths are. If this is one of your strengths, looking back and referencing runs, you need to be able to be vocal about it and let people know, hey, I'm thinking about Midler's run. We gave Midler's run a 72.4, and Midler also had a bail, and this is better than that. That's enough for the rest of the panel to be able to get on your page within a matter of seconds, because you only have seconds to get your point scores in, and you need every single millisecond of that time in order to deliberate and still keep the contest on schedule. So being able to come up with your run scores quickly and effectively is something you need to practice at. It is a learned skill in order to get your information across effectively, and it is something that you will get better at the more events that you do. For Daisuke's second run, it starts off the same. Backside 360 on the pyramid gap, followed up with a backside kickflip on the pyramid gap. Fakie nose blunt stall on the quarter pipe, which is cool. Bails again on the nose slide, trick out. Turns it around a little bit and increases with the 270 backside lip slide on the handrail. Followed up with a 360 flip on the pyramid gap. And ending with a pyramid gap, kick flip, and another bail. Again, 2 bails in a run. Compared to the anchor score, it's substantially less difficult, and there's an additional bail in this run, so it wouldn't be fair to have this run be incredibly close to our anchor score. So we'll land somewhere in the middle with that 34.83. Jake Ghilardi, run number 2. Starting off the same, ollie on the pyramid, gap to frontside tail slide on the big hubba. Cleaner 360 flip this time. So that's a downgrade. He did a front blunt. The first time, he just did a kind of barely scraping the truck on that frontside 5.0, so that can't be overlooked. Even a small quarter pipe trick like that has to be taken into consideration. You have to make sure in your notes that you're making sure that you are writing down every trick that happens here. And ending exactly the same with the big spin frontside board side to fakie. So if you were to give that run a higher score than the first run, because he landed some of the things in there a little bit cleaner than the first run, then you would have gotten that incorrect. The frontside blunt stall on the quarter pipe is a substantial quarter pipe trick compared to just doing a frontside 5.0 scrape. The quarter pipe tricks are just as important as any other obstacle on the course. So you have to take that into consideration when you are coming up with a run score. So this has to be scored lower than Jake's first run. So he's going to get a 72.77. So for Mickey Papa's second run, we have a very similar run to his first one, except the bail at the end was on a harder trick. That switch front feeble is a lot harder than the bail in his first run, which is going to account for more of a deduction. So unfortunately, you got to keep that in mind because not all bails are created equal. This run score has to be slightly less than the first run score. Yuto's second run. Starting with the good nollie frontside nose blunt, frontside 5.0, frontside blunt stall in the quarter pipe. There's the backside Smith grind that he missed the first time, and yeah, there's a backside nose blunt stall in the quarter pipe to follow it up. Into a 360 flip on the stairs, nollie nose slide on the small hubba. A back blunt, keeping his flow going. So it's really good use of course, and it's really good flow and consistency here. The gap to frontside nose blunt. What I am noticing is that these are a lot of blunt slide and blunt stall variation tricks. So there is going to be some repetition coming into the overall score when we do that. Ending with the 270, the nollie 270 lip slide. So this is a good run. The technical difficulty is definitely there. There is only one flip trick, however. So if you were thinking that this run should be anywhere near the 90s, that's too high. There's still criteria that's missing here in order for that to be a high 80s scoring run. But there is a lot of criteria that he fulfilled here, and putting this run in the 70s wouldn't feel right, but anything in the mid to high 80s also doesn't feel right because there's still missing criteria. So we're gonna land at an 83.42. Having a look now at Sora's second run. Starting with a really difficult 180 switch crook on the bump to big hubba. 360 flip on the pyramid top. Back Smith. Oh, lost the shoe, lost the hat, lost the board. Bit of a yard sale going on here. Yeah, so the run after a bail like that, especially on the big section and all your gear abandons you, this run kind of falls apart for me. Yeah, 2 bails in a row, and that's the end of the run. So it's going to be leaps and bounds away from his first run score. But again, even though one of these run scores doesn't count, technically you can give it whatever you want, but visually you want to make sure that you're in the right ballpark because you don't want to send the wrong message. So scoring this like a 3.88 would be sending the wrong message. You still want to make sure that even though you know that this run score isn't going to count towards their overall score. It needs to be correct. And so again, I'm looking at a run that kind of fell apart, that has 2 bails, but also has at least 1 heavy hitting trick. And that makes me think back to Yuto's run for his second run where he had 2 bails, or his first run where he had 2 bails, but he started with a nollie nose one on the big handrail. So to me, that's pretty comparable. He got a 41. This one was a little bit worse than that, the overall impression to me. So I'm going to give it a 39.14. Having a look now at Giovanni's second run, where things could potentially come together. Starting off the same, it doesn't look like he locked into that half cab frontside nose grind. So you want to be thinking about style and execution, which is one of the judging criteria here. Heel flip frontside board slide was solid. That was his best filler trick. Backside nose grind. So again, we've got some pretty small filler tricks besides the heel flip frontside board slide. Frontside feeble is pretty stock filler. He didn't get a chance to land this in his first run, and he comes through and lands it in this one. So the cab frontside board slide, which isn't the most difficult trick. It's not like he did a cab frontside blunt slide, but this run does not have a bail in it. So it's definitely going to go up from his first run score. There are still things that are missing from this run. If you were thinking about 80s, you should be looking at Yuto's run, and to me, the caliber isn't really there to justify going into the 80s. The style and the execution, especially since he didn't lock into that cab frontside nose grind I'm thinking about. There's only 1 flip trick variation, which was the heel flip front board. So there is still criteria that Yuto fulfilled more than Giovanni did in this run. And visually, I don't like this going into the 80s. And visually, I wouldn't put this over Sora's run either, because Sora's run was a little bit more dynamic than this. So it's not leaps and bounds away from that, but I like it being close to Sora's run. So we're going to land at a 77.32. Run number 2 now from Shane O'Neill. Nice nollie Kirk pop out. Big spin frontside board slide to fakie. Even though it's not the most technically difficult trick, he still did it clean. Bit of a missed opportunity there. Could have just done a blunt fakie, would have been fine. But considering he follows it up with a switch flip backside tail slide, that more than makes up for it. No one else on the course can do that trick and throw it in the middle of a run. Even the switch frontside big spin, like, it's still really cool that he's doing that. Nobody else is doing that. Again, perfect crook nollie flip out, followed up with a 360 flip on the pyramid, on the quarter pipe. Nice little switch crook to end it. That bail obviously doesn't count. That was way past time. So coming back to my point with runs that have more technical difficulty in them, to me, this is by far the most technically difficult run that's been landed so far. I would put this above Yuto's run. I liked how full and dynamic Yuto's run is, but Shane still did do a difficult trick on the quarter pipe. He did that 360 flip at the end. He did an incredibly difficult filler trick with the switch flip back tail. He hit the big section with the big spin frontside board slide, just like Yuto did. And he also had the crooked grind nollie flip out. And so I'm looking at a run here that's got uniqueness, and it's got a good use of the course. He hit all the obstacles they needed to hit. It's got technical difficulty, and it's got no bails. And the style and the execution is there for me. This isn't a 90s run for me, but visually this should be scored above Yuto's run. Not by much. There should be still a little bit of wiggle room between those runs. So I would land this anywhere in that range, but we're looking at an 86.93, which I think is fair for this kind of a run. Looking now at Millar's second run, starting off with the 270 lip and bailing on the alley-oop 50-50. So missing that first impression run. That first impression is always really important. Oh, he's upgrading the frontside nose run to the frontside crook. That's cool. Backside 180 nose run on the 2-flat 2 hubba. Pretty good alley-oop frontside air there. Coming out of the quarter pipe pretty well. We always like to see tricks if they're going to be aired out of the quarter pipe to go above the coping. Wow, taking the shortcut route over to the big handrail. See, that is actually going to count. You need to be very careful about that, if tricks are going to count or not. Everybody, it's your job as a judge, whether you're sitting in judge number 1, judge number 5, or you're the head judge, you need to absolutely make sure that that tricks are going to count or if they're not going to count. So that was popped in time. If it wasn't, that could have made a really substantial difference on the overall score. Now, because of the bail that was in this run, it obviously cannot go above his first run, even though he upgraded the frontside nose grind to a frontside crooked grind on the bump to handrail. It's still not going to go above it. Now, the thing to remember is that not all bails are created equal. The bail in this run was on a frontside 180 to 50-50, so it's not a gigantic trick in his run. It is a filler trick, but it's still got to go down. So when I think about where that should go, it can still be in the 70s, I think, with this bail. It's still better than the 64 that we gave to Giovanni's run, which had 1 bail in it. That run only had 4 landed tricks in it. They were incredibly technically difficult, but this is a run that's pretty full. Even with that bail, there is 7 or 8 landed tricks that are in this run. So visually, even though it can't go above his first run, it should still be in the 70s. Looking at Kelvin's second run now, starting off with the front blunt pop over, quickly into the frontside tailslide to fakie on the bump to big hubba. Getting a move on the bump to big hubba is a smart strategy on this course because it was absolutely massive. I like that 2-piece, the nollie frontside nose run into front blunt on the quarter pipe. Followed up with a kickflip back lip on the 5-stair rail. That's really great. Really good variation. I like he kept the flow going here with an actual frontside tail slide, not just a frontside tail stall. Followed up with a backside tail slide. It helps so much with the overall impression when you hit the quarter pipes, especially when you do a slide trick as opposed to a stall. And with a pretty steezy cab back lip on the big handrail. So if we're looking at criteria-wise, criteria met. He did a pretty good job at hitting all of those. There's flip tricks. He hit the quarter pipes. He hit the big section. There's variation. There's not heavy repetition here. This isn't, I wouldn't say that there is enough here to justify scoring this over Shane's run, because I think the technical difficulty of Shane's run outweighs the sum of all the parts of this run. But it would be a diss not to have this be in the mix close to that score. I think it would be the wrong message. So I think it'd be fair to put this underneath Shane's run and give it an 84.91. Looking at DeCenzo's second run, this is the final chance for him to get the top spot. I think that the caliber of the technical difficulty of his run could do it. He did land the nollie flip really well on that, so this is a run that does not have any bails in it so far, which means that it can only go up if it is a fully landed run. Getting that backside blunt slide done really well. Frontside flip again, even though it wasn't the cleanest, it was still a frontside flip as opposed to just doing a kick turn. A frontside 360 on the pyramid top. He's the only one to do that. And again, this cool frontside flip off the top deck and over. He's the only one to do that as well. So here's the thing. The technical difficulty is there. He fulfilled a lot of the criteria. Technically difficulty speaking, I still think that Shane's switch flip backside tail slide that he did as filler, I don't see something like that. I don't see a highlight like that for this kind of a run, but I think overall he did a really good job, Ryan, of fulfilling the judging criteria. and meeting it really well in order to earn a really high scoring run. I still don't think that I would edge this over Shane's run score, but it should still be neck and neck with that. I think that that feels fair. So we're gonna land at an 86.02. If you were scoring this really far away from Shane's run, I think you'd probably miss the mark. So hopefully you've scored this close to Shane's. So for Daisuke's single trick, we have a 270 backside lip slide, 270 out. It's obviously a really gnarly trick, but because he already did a 270 backside lip slide on that same handrail in his run, there's repetition to consider. So I would keep this in the mid 80s to send that right message. There's an argument here for this to be in the high 80s, maybe even in the 90s if the moment felt right, but because of that repetition, we got to keep this a little bit lower. Our next skater in is Jake Alardi. For Mickey Papa's single trick, we've got a switch backside lip slide on the big handrail. This isn't a very difficult trick anymore, so it shouldn't get an incredibly difficult or high ranking numerical score. So this is gonna land at a 71.12. This is not a competitive trick to see in the single trick section. And even though there's no repetition rule deduction applied, this isn't a very competitive score. All the guys want to see 80s and up. Really, that's when you're actually in the mix, which is really 83 and up is what they want to see. So for Yuto's single trick, he does his signature nollie 270 to backside board slide on the big handrail. This used to be a high 80s scoring trick when he first did it. It's not that way anymore. A lot of other people started doing this trick besides him. And what we scored it in recent events is in 83. So he landed it really well. He didn't do this specific trick in his run, so we're not giving him repetition deduction on that. So he's gonna get an 83.86. And for Sora's single trick, we've got a half cab backside Smith grind on the big handrail. Over the years, this trick has lost a lot of its potency. Cab back lip has become a very easy trick for the men's division, and a lot of the variations of the cab tricks have become a lot more diluted as the events go by, I've noticed. And that's something, something that the rest of the Olympic panel agrees with as well. So for a half cab to backside Smith grind, it's not that technically difficult. The risk really isn't gigantic. And even if he isn't getting a repetition rule deduction, which he is not, he's still going to land at a 77.52. He would need something else. He would need to either do a shove it out or come to fakie or something else out of this trick in order to justify getting into the 80s. Putting this trick into the 80s sends the wrong message. So for Giovanni's single trick, we've got a front 780 to switch crook on the bump to big hubba. The risk here is pretty good. It's not a super difficult trick to do 180 switch crook, so it doesn't feel like 80s to me. I know that we gave a 79 to Sora in the run section, and that was the first trick that he had in his run for this. And I think that that was right. I think that kind of a score feels right for this kind of a trick. It needs something else for me for it to jump into the 80s. So I like putting this front 180 switch crooks at a 79.54. And for Shane's single trick, we've got a really well done switch flip frontside board slide on the big handrail. You have to reward switch tricks, especially if it's switch flip in tricks. Even though switch flip frontside board slide isn't the hardest move, it's still a risky trick. And we always like to reward those kinds of those kinds of tricks, especially if they're switched. So we're gonna get him at an 86.92. This isn't a high 80s trick, definitely not anymore. It probably would have been a few years ago, but not anymore. Considering the trick difficulty being raised year by year and event by event, but this still should be given a substantial score, and 86 is a fair score for that. Midler's single trick, cat back nose blunt. Yeah, that's really gnarly. The cat back nose blunt is a really, really difficult trick. It hasn't lost any of its potency to me. It is so much harder than doing a cat back lip. And so to me, this still is a 90s trick. This trick got a 91 in Paris at the Olympic Games. This rail wasn't as big as a rail in Paris, and that was the ledger that I was referencing when we were coming up with these scores for this test set. So it's gonna land at a 90.46. When you are trying to decide if a trick or a run is in the 90s, it's gotta be something special. There has to be some fairy dust on it. It can't be a run-of-the-mill trick. There has to either be a trick done in the run that is so bonkers that it makes everybody go wild and there's a big moment there. But the single tricks, being in the 90s, you've got to make sure that there is enough of a point break in between the other tricks that you're scoring in the mid 80s to have that moment and to justify putting a trick into the 90s, because the risk just has to be there. A cat backside nose blunt is definitely deserving of a 90, and it should be rewarded a couple more points away from tricks that are not as risky. And Kelvin's single trick, we have a kickflip backside tail slide on the big handrail to fakie. I love this trick. I love a kickflip backside tail slide. I think it's a classic trick. It's just as classic as a backside nose blunt to me. I like it a lot, and I think that the risk is there. It's historically always scored in the 80s. When you do a kickflip backside tail slide on a handrail, the risk is definitely there, and it's definitely arguable. It's not going to get a bananas score, but compared to like-minded tricks that are in the low 80s, that's normally where this trick lands. So kickflip backside tail slide is normally always going to be a low 80s trick, and that's no different with this 82.48 done for Kelvin. And for Ryan's single trick, we have a really cool nollie heel flip to backside board slide on the big handrail. This is in that like moderately difficult, technically difficult range, which is normally always in that mid to low 80s kind of category. In order to jump up above this, it would need to be like nollie heel front nose or nollie heel flip nose grind or something like that. The nollie heel flip board slide is still cool. It still deserves to be in the 80s, but it should be in that like-minded low 80s technical difficulty scoring tricks. So this is going to land him at an 84.37, and that's also because there's no repetition deduction applied to the score. All right, here we go. Kicking things off with the anchor calibration run. We have Virginia Aquas for women's test set 1, starting with the backside feeble grind on the big handrail, followed up with a really nice kickflip on the A-frame bump. That's a really good two-piece. I really like seeing that. Starting strong really affects the overall impression. Getting speed with the ollie over the pyramid. Nice board slide on the bump to rail. Kind of wish you would have just turned around right there. That would have been cool. Unfortunately, that's the first bail of the run. Luckily, it's in the middle of the run. I still feel like you're able to increase the overall impression. If you have a bail in the middle of the run, you could still pick things up, which is exactly what she's doing, right? That frontside air on the quarter pipe was cool. Not a lot of the women do frontside airs on the quarter pipe, so we love to see that. And then ending with the varial heel flip on the A-frame bump. Even that is pretty cool. That's substantial, that filler of a flip trick. These little gems, these little mid lights, we call them, in the middle of the runs, they really move the needle when it comes to the overall impression. So this is very similar, I would say, to Gabby Mazzetto's anchor run score. The only difference I'm seeing here, even though this run has a bail and Gabby's does not, and they both have at least one flip trick, Virginia has 2 flip tricks, and she has a lot harder of a big section handrail trick with the backside feeble as opposed to Gabby's backside board slide. So I'm gonna score this slightly above and reward Virginia over Gabby. Even though she has a bail, I'm gonna reward the risk and the technical difficulty. And for women's test set 1 for Virginia, we have a single trick of a backside 50-50 on the big handrail. Now, she did not do a backside 50-50 in her run. She did a backside feeble grind in her run, the run that counted. So there's no repetition rule deduction here. Backside 50-50 is a cool trick for the women. It's still pretty up there. So this is probably going to be in that mid to high 60s range, depending on how we normally score backside 50-50s and go up from there. It's definitely not in the 70s. It's not technical enough. You need to get into like Smith grinds and maybe crooked grinds in order to be in that zone. But backside 50-50, cool trick. Yeah, mid to high 60s. Something to take note of here is that Isabelli from test set 2, she did a frontside 50-50 on the big handrail as well, and she got scored in the same range. That 68 is what we had for that. So one of the most important things is to always keep track of your notes. Always keep track of things that you scored in previous runs, in previous rounds, because guess who's paying attention to every single score that goes out? Every skater that went before. A lot of judges tend to get lost. They tend to like reset their brains sometimes when there's a new heat, when there's better skating. You have to stay consistent and make sure that you are scoring like-minded tricks that happen at the beginning of the day, the same as you would at the end of the day. Kicking things off with our first rider in, we have Keat Oldenbooving. Unfortunately, starting off with a bail is really, really tough to recover from. She's got good speed though, I like that. A missed opportunity there. Little backside air on the quarter pipe. I wish she would have landed the tricks in her run before that because that's a cool filler. And I like her speed and I like her style. Even though the tricks are basic here, it still looks good. It's fun to watch. Little high speed nose slide followed by the little boneless. Nice little crooked grind on the small hubba. Small little backside ollie on the quarter. Ending with the backside 360 on that A-frame. Oh, she just missed that heel flip. So that has potential to be a really fun run. Even though there weren't big section tricks there, you don't need to hit the big section necessarily to get points on the board. Unfortunately, with the 2 bails and with the missteps and missing tricks and things like that, the run kind of fell apart. So that's going to have to stay down in the 20s, especially if we compare that to our anchor run in this test set. So it's fair to put it down there. You got to be fair with the rest of the field, but pay attention to that kind of run, because if you see another run that has 2 bails, you should be referencing that run from Keat. Next in, we have Resenia. These runs are tough. For runs like this, you need to make up as much time as you possibly can. So by the time the run is done, everybody should know that this is going to be a single-digit run score. And you need to have that number put in the second that the 45-second timer is done. You need to be able to bank as many seconds as you possibly can so that the time when it does come where it's really difficult to score a run and you need extra time, maybe 20, 30 seconds even, which is an eternity, by the way, to come up with a run score, you'll have it because you will have banked time on runs like this. So you have to be under 10 for a run like this. Skater number 3, run number 1, we have Asia Lansey. Starting with a ollie on the small 2-flat 2, frontside 5-0 on the curb ledge, backside 50-50 on the quarter pipe. So far, this is very standard tricks. Backside nose slide, didn't make it all the way. It's not considered a bail, obviously. It just goes under style and execution. Style and execution is important. You should be scoring people higher that grind all the way to the end of the spot, as opposed to people who do not. Long way to travel for frontside 50-50. We have a kickflip on the A-frame, so that's the first flip trick that's happened. Little nollie 360 on flat. That's really not going to move the needle on the score. The judges do not like seeing bump to flat flip tricks, and especially not tricks that just kind of stop and kill your speed. It's not considered a bail. So what we're looking at here, compared to Virginia's run, there's just no risk. We can't penalize it too much, but the thought of scoring this higher than our anchor score doesn't really make sense. Even though our anchor score has a bail, it still felt like a more dynamic run because Virginia hit the big section rail with that backside feeble, also had a kickflip on the A-frame bump, and also had a varial heel flip on the A-frame bump. So in my opinion, there's more risk even with the bail from our anchor run. I'm not going to penalize this too much, but we are going to stay in that middle 40s range with this run as to not confuse our anchor run score. Next rider in, we have Amici. Again, this is a run where you can bank time with the judging panel. You should be talking about it the whole time and understanding that starting with a bail and ending with a bail and judging 2 tricks, you're in the single digit category. So you can either reference back to the other runs that you've given single digits to place it correctly. But there shouldn't be any more than 2 seconds that you should spend putting your run score in for this. It's single digits for sure, under 10. And again, for Rizu Akama's run, we have a run with some missteps here. We have 2 bails back to back, which pretty much throws the use of course and the flow of consistency and the overall impression away at this point when you have 2 bails in a row. There are some cool highlights that are going on here with the feeble and the big handrail. To me, this is in the 20s, but if you need help referencing quickly where runs should go, starting off finding runs that have 2 bails in them is the easiest way to do it. Because you can look at what their big section tricks were, you can look at how many times they flipped their board. It's very easy to find where your place is when you have a run with multiple bails in it, when you compare it to other runs that have the same amount of bails. Good skateboarding, we've always said, is easy to judge. Once you start getting into the weeds with bails, it starts to get a little bit harder, and you will need more time to place some of these runs. But to me, with these 2 bails, we're in the 20s. For Arapan, we have her first run having 2 bails. And if you looked at other runs that were even recently that we scored in the low 20s that have 2 bails in them, they had big section tricks. So this run doesn't have a big section trick. Easily, you know that it shouldn't be in that same 20s point bracket. There's an easy argument here to keep this in the teens. Anywhere in that area, you're in the right zone. But if you're in the 30s or if you're in the single digits, I think you're a little bit off. Next in, we have Tang. Again, this is a run where you know it's going to be in the single digits. There's 3 bails here. So this is a run where you need to bank time, be vocal with your judges, and get those scores in very quickly. Next rider in for Nishimura, we've got a 2-trick run here. A frontside board slide on the bump to bar and a frontside 50-50 on the big handrail. It's cool that you did the frontside 50-50 on the big handrail. Unfortunately, it was followed up by two bails. We have other runs that have 2 or 3 tricks in them in the 20s that have 2 bails in them, and that feels fair for this. You should definitely be in that low 20s category. So for Itzel's first run, we have a kickflip on the pyramid gap to start, and a backside grind on the bump to ledge, followed up by 2 bails. So we know that already we should be thinking about in the 20s for runs that have 2 bails on them if they had a big section trick. We've got no big section trick here, so we know that we're gonna be in the teens. To me, this feels like a low teens because you've got 2 bails back to back and it just kind of throws everything off. So that's the territory that you should be in. Last rider in, we have Aoi. Frontside lip slide. That was strong, it's a good way to start. I wish that was a backside disaster, something more difficult. It's a lot of time spent for not that much action. Unfortunately, we got a bail here. All right, crooked grind on the big handrail. So even with the bail, when I was thinking about our anchor score in the 50s, I feel like the technical difficulty has now surpassed that even with the bail. Back 50, back 180. It was a little bit hairy, but still pretty cool. I like the style there. So yeah, I like that run, even though there's a bail there. The hitting the big section twice is kind of the only justification for keeping that in the 50s, but that's kind of the territory that you should be in. Next in, we have Keat. Starting the run with the bail. Difficult overall impression starting your run with a bail. I don't think I've ever seen somebody come back from starting their run with a bail and putting up a decent score. I like the backside big spin on the quarter pipe. That was cool, even though it was below coping. See, so that backside 360, that is bail. She didn't aim correctly for the course. She went too far off to the side and she had to jump off of her board because of that. That is absolutely considered a bail. Ending with the backside air. So not much happened in that run. You already know that runs that have 2 bails and really basic tricks are down in the high teens and low 20s. And again, unfortunately for Ksenia's second run, we have just as many issues. Only 2 landed tricks. There's a bail. Nothing happened in this run. We know that this is a single-digit score. All right, we now have the second run for Asia. Starting again, the same with the ollie down the 2 flat 2, frontside 5-0 on the small curb ledge. See, I wish you would have done like a backside 5-0 there on the quarter pipe. Always on your second run, you want to make little tweaks to increase the score. She could have easily crooked grounded that. She wouldn't even have needed to go all the way to the end. She could have done a backside 5-0 on the quarter pipe and then crooked grounded that bump to ledge. And now we would have seen some more arguments, some more weight to put behind scoring this above our anchor score, which sketchy kickflip. And then again, yeah, just an ollie backside 180. So the kickflip on the quarter pipe counts. It was way underneath coping, so the style and the execution there, unfortunately, was pretty low. I mean, she did tricks there, but to me, the wrist still wasn't there, and without her hitting the big section, it's difficult for me to justify scoring this above Gabby's run, and definitely, I still can't score this above Virginia's run. So our 2 anchor scores, I'm still having trouble scoring this above because I don't have enough evidence to support it. I think that the other women fulfilled some of the other judging criteria a little bit better than this run. I like it. It's going to be close, but in order to send the right message, we still have to score this underneath our 2 anchor runs from test set 1 and test set 2. And we have Mimiji's second attempt here, starting with a clean frontside board slide on the handrail. Good kickflip on the wedge bump. Yeah, again, like it's cool that she did an ollie heel, but just doing that bump to flat, it's hard to reward that much. Bailing on the big section. Now that's a substantial bail in the run. Like I've said before, not all bails are created equal. If you bail on a kickflip on flat in your run, it's not going to be considered as much of a deduction as you bailing on the big section. So that's going to take a pretty big bite out of the overall run score. It seemed like it was pretty comparable, maybe a little bit better than Gabby's based off the technical difficulty of the flip tricks and just the caliper and the way that they were done. But because there was a bail in the big section, we're in the high 30s. Now we have Rizu's second run here. Starting off with the frontside shove it on the wedge bump, followed up by another frontside shove it. So back to back, very, very repetitious with the overall impression there. It's a good kickflip on the gap. Yeah, the frontside nose blunt. Even though she kind of stayed up there and took a lunch break, it was still cool. I could still appreciate it. Again, there's another frontside big spin. So the technical difficulty is there. This one's kind of tricky because it is there and you do have to acknowledge it. But I mean, she's almost doing the same trick over and over and over again. I like the feeble grind on the big rail. Little ollie there. Don't really count that as a trick towards the overall score, but so here's the deal. Because of the repetition of all that, it was technically more difficult than our anchor runs, but because of the repetition, you would score that really close to those anchor runs and those anchor scores. That's how you kind of handle those scenarios. For Orapan's second run, things come together a little bit more, which I think can justify bumping her up into the 20s because we remove a bail here in this run. There are a couple of tricks here. She did hit the quarter pipe and like, you know, a frontside disaster and a rock and roll fakie. It's nothing crazy, so this should still be in the 20s, but definitely better than her first run. Next in, we have Tang. Again, this is a run where you know it's going to be in the single digits. There's 3 bails here. So this is a run where you need to bank time, be vocal with your judges, and get those scores in very quickly. So this is interesting. Nishimura's second run is a mirror image of her first run. You cannot improve doing the same run or the same trick over again and landing things cleaner. You can't do the same run and get a higher score. So in this case, whatever you scored the first run, it has to be slightly underneath for the second run. It's the same exact run. For Itzel's second run, we get to learn the same lesson twice in a row from Nishimura. This is the same run that we just saw from her first run, with a kickflip on the pyramid gap and a backside grind on the bump to the small ledge, followed up by 2 bails. Now, this cannot go over the first score. Why? Because it's the exact same run, and you can't improve upon a run or a trick that you've already done by landing it cleaner. That's in the rule book. It can't happen. Your second run score for Flores must be lower than the run score that you gave for her first run. All right, we have Aori's second run. Frontside lip slide. Axle stall there. Frontside 50-50. So we're still keeping it pretty mild as far as the technical difficulty goes, obviously. That crooked grind is sick. That's definitely the hardest trick in this run so far, and it probably will remain that way. I'm not anticipating any flip tricks happening here being added to it. So she skipped the backside 180 out, obviously to try and get through a clean run, because it was a little bit hairy on the first run. Yeah, so that bail was after time. So yeah, we're gonna improve on the first run score. There's an argument here to keep this in the 60s, like basically just because of that crooked grind, but without a flip trick and without some more technically difficult filler tricks, there's no way this run score can get anywhere near the 70s. So if you are gonna go into the 60s, your score definitely has to improve from the first run score, but I would keep it pretty modest in the 60s if you're gonna go in there. So for tricks like this, a nose slide 270 shove it out for Keith's single trick. Again, there's not much risk here. This is a very basic trick. So we're gonna be in the mid 50s on this. If this were on a technically larger, more difficult obstacle, I could justify going higher on this, but for tricks that are done like this in this way, it's hard to reward it because we don't wanna reward tricks that are done in this way. And for Ksenia's single trick, frontside 5 on the small hubba, it's less technically difficult than the 54 we just gave to Keith for the nose slide 270 shove it. It's on a small obstacle, the risk isn't there. It's easily in the 45 to low 50s range. And for Asia's single trick, we have a frontside board slide on the 5-stair handrail. You should be looking at the run score or the single trick score that we just gave to Ksenia's frontside 5-0 on the small hubba. This is slightly harder frontside board slide than a frontside 5-0 on a hubba because it's on the handrail. There's no repetition deduction, so you can be anywhere in the mid 40s to high 40s on this, but certainly not in the 50s for a frontside board slide on a 5-stair. So again, from Mimiji's single trick, we have a scenario where it's a full repetition deduction, where it's the same trick on the same spot that was done in the run that counted. This is a frontside board slide on the big handrail. If she had not done this trick in her run, this would be in that kind of higher 60 zone, but because this is a full repetition deduction, we take about 5 points down, which is gonna put her in the low 60s, around the 63 range. So Rizu's single trick is actually really interesting because normally people don't do quarter pipe tricks. She did slide a little bit. It wasn't a perfect slide. She did kind of lock up on her truck and like an overcrook for a second, and she did grab her board on the way in, but that's still a backside nose blunt. And we've always said before, in street skateboarding, all the obstacles on the course are street obstacles, even the quarter pipes. And we like to reward people for being creative on the course, especially on the quarter pipes, because we don't really see that. As long as the trick that they're doing on the quarter pipe feels like a street-based or a street-born trick. If you went up and did like a 360 nose grab or something like that that felt more of like a park trick, it probably wouldn't be rewarded as high, but a backside nose blunt on a quarter pipe pop in is pretty sick. So I could see this being in the high 60s, maybe even a 70. Now for Orapan single trick, we have a board slide down the long and low flat bar. She did do this in a run. She did it to fakie here. It still feels repetitious, so she is going to get slightly docked for this. We have comparable tricks that have very low risk in that high 40s, low 50s zone, so that's where this should land. And unfortunately, again, the lower scores kind of continue with Tang into the single trick section with the 50-50 shove it on the curb ledge. It's the smallest obstacle on the course. 50-50 shove it is unfortunately a little kid trick. There's no risk there. We've given no risk tricks on slightly bigger obstacles in the 40s and 50s, so I think it makes sense for this to be somewhere in the 30s. So for Nishimura, moving into the single trick section, this is a really important thing to remember here with the repetition rule deduction that you need to be consistent with, incredibly vigilantly consistent with, because this is exactly the same trick that Isabelli did in the single trick section, and Isabelli got a 68, and Isabelli got the full point total for that 50-50 because she didn't do it in a run. Now, Nishimura, she did do it in a run, so you have to make sure that this score is lower than the 50-50 that you gave for Isabelli, to Isabelli for that concept alone. So you should be at least 5 points under. I gave this a 63, you should be in that category. And again, a repetition rule deduction for Itzel. She had the backside 50-50 on the bump to small ledge, which was done in her run. Same spot, same trick, full repetition deduction. It is just a 50-50. This has got to be down in the 30s. There's no risk here. And for the final trick, we have a backside lip slide on the big handrail. There's no repetition deduction here. It wasn't done in the run that counted. And you need to be referencing your trick ledger at this point and seeing that you gave a lip slide in the low 70s, probably around a 72. This definitely has to be a couple points more than that because it's a harder trick, not by much. So if you're in the mid 70s category, you are in the right position.